We're going to call this meeting of the RCDC to order at 7 p.m. May 9th, 2019. If I could start with roll call with our city attorney, or our RCDC attorney.
Charlie Zach here, is that how you do this?
Yeah, perfect.
Pat Sheehan.
Mike Dyson.
Becky Tittleman.
Barry O'Cambry.
Susan Miller.
And we have got our quorum. Good. Do we have any public comments? There's no public here. No public here, so we're going to move on. The approval of the March meeting minutes.
Aye.
All in favor? We got a motion. Motion from Becky, second from Susan. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, minutes approved. We have a public hearing regarding a project to improve drainage in the upper park by expanding the pervious cover in the area designated in the master plan as the pet off-leash area, and to request funding from RCDC in the amount of $30,000 for phase 1 of the project. We're going to open the public hearing at 7:01. Nobody from the public is here, so we're going to close the public meeting at 7:01. And there is no discussion or action to be taken in regards to the public hearing. Let's see, where do we have our, this is the presentation. I should have called Nudge up for this. Got it. So we are not closed on that item. Sorry, Jessica.
That's okay. All right. My name is Jessica Zarek. I'm with Nudge Design with the landscape architects that have been working with you all for about a year and a half. So I'm just going to go through the process, the dog park, the planning, familiarize you guys with the site, which probably are already pretty familiar, and then I'll field any questions you have. So let's see, we might be frozen, but
Okay, now.
no.
Try the touchpad, see if I think you're frozen. Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Is the mouse on?
Just went over to the right.
Okay, there we go.
There we go. Alright, we solved one problem but ended up with another.
Yeah.
Maybe close it and start over.
Next meeting, we should have our smart board up.
Awesome.
All right.
There we go.
Here we go. All right, park character. So we looked at a couple areas, mostly the area where currently have informal parking, and then we also traced that area below, the steep slope, the brush. There are some big trees in there. So we did a little assessment just of what you already have there at the upper area and this lower area. We also looked at some other dog parks in the area for sizing, so we could see what we would get size-wise in the different areas. So we looked at Yard Bar, which is up on North Burnett, has a small and a large dog area, the Norwood State Dog Park, and we also identified how much of the total park area is dedicated to off-leash. And then West Austin Park. This is right in my neighborhood, and it's got these nice terraces. It's really well loved, well used. So we looked at the overall square footage. Moving fast. And then this is our overall proposal. So we've got about 13,000 square feet up in this upper area. So just to walk you through, we looked at cleaning up this parking area a little bit to define it a little better, and we came up with some different options for how to mark the parking spaces, but using different alternative materials, so it doesn't become too definitive, but it directs people where to go. And then a nice little turnaround here. We got a nature trail coming through, traversing this area back here, so there'd be some invasive species cleanup, some limbing up with the big trees there. We're rerouting the walking trail to come through this area. We made sure to leave enough space here so that people could pull up chairs and watch when there's games going on. And then some native gardens here to accent this area. We have a corral entry here, so there's an entry area with one gate coming in where you can take your dog off the leash, and then another gate to come into this main area. We're proposing to plant some trees for shade. There's not a lot of that in this area, so a mix of sizes of trees, and also reusing the boulders that you have out there that are delineating the parking area, so scattering those out. We also have an amenity area, so this would be where you have your water fountain, some benches, the dog waste bag dispenser, and we also have looked at some options for donor recognition, something that's flexible that can change over time, and you can add to that. So we've got a fence going around here, and so this is phase one that we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Everything that you've mentioned is phase one?
Yes.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. And then this area down here would get you another 4,000 square feet, and we see that as an opportunity for a very different experience, a more naturalistic space. This would be more where dogs can get a straight shot and really run their hearts out, and then here would be a little more shady, a little more like that West Austin dog park. And so you'd have to traverse that slope. So looking at some limestone block to get you down that slope, having a gate here, and then a fenced-in space here. We wanted to leave enough space away from the neighbors, so we just have that nature trail coming through. So that would be phase two.
Where's the nature trail? It's not on the map? Or?
It's here. It's under the trees.
Right now, there's just all
Right.
woods back there.
Yeah.
But
So
there's
just
a
go along that
home.
back edge.
There's a home that backs up to those trees.
Yeah, there's a home that's over here. So we've met with those neighbors and walked around out there. So we'd be very mindful and work with them and make sure that we left enough brush covering the fence area so it wasn't invasive for them. And we'd like to traverse this slope and have people be able to get back up here on the other side. So that's that.
Stop me. What is the 30,000 cover what you're talking about? Just the upper part?
Yeah, that's phase one. Mm-hmm.
So how does that relate to the pet company that was willing to donate the water fountain and pet area?
Well, we're creating an amenity area here, so that's where the fountain would go.
But does that, I guess it would be helpful to understand the breakdown of the 30,000. So for roughly a third of an acre, I guess it would be helpful to understand kind of the breakdown of, I guess the tree expense seems to me that would be the largest. And then what would the maintenance be on that?
I don't have a specific number that I can tell you, but I can definitely get those for you. The materials we're talking about is something a little more, we've talked about concrete for the path, for the trail. It's better for erosion. We want to limit the pervious cover, but in some areas we think that would be necessary. We also can use decomposed granite like you have out there. But as we've seen in the last few days, there's a lot of erosion and materials getting washed away in this kind of weather.
So that's actually raises a great point. Relative to all the drainage issues we're having, does it make sense to make this investment ahead of understanding how we can protect the area from flooding?
Yeah.
Or has that been something that's been explored?
Yeah, well, that upper area, in my experience at the park, is not the area that gets flooded. That's where the surface runoff comes from that then comes down the slope here. So definitely by planting gardens, and in the master plan we had up at this top edge we used biofiltration gardens, which are a fancy way of saying we're trying to direct the water to these areas and let the ground really soak it up before it runs down the slope. So we would definitely, try to plant as much as we can to mitigate that.
So I noticed the way this is, I'm guessing, this agenda item was written intelligently or for a reason, including pervious, rather than noting that, in fact, the goal is to decrease the amount of impervious coverage that currently exists. Is that fair? The reason I ask that is because this agenda item says expanding the pervious coverage. I guess to that end is part of the proposal, part of what you guys are proposing, what Nudge is proposing, is potentially a solution to some of this runoff?
Well, right now we don't actually have any impervious cover up here. There's no concrete up here. We have the gravel area, so we would be scraping the gravel away, but there's nothing. So
kind of taking out what I would refer to as hard pan and putting more something to turf or some kind of bark chips just seems to be.
Yeah, so that would definitely increase the capacity for infiltration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Alternatively, right now you've got gravel, which I imagine is pretty compressed, and not a lot of water is going into the ground there. So it would definitely help with that. And by adding planting here, also around the edge, we can look at, if we have the budget, if there are ways to expand it over here, like we had proposed in the master plan. We can kind of see where the money gets us.
Sorry, I guess to that point, goes back to, Susan's point. If we could see a breakdown, do we have a breakdown of what how the 30,000 is intended to be allocated?
It was a pretty rough for the phase one to remove, then to sod, and to some fences.
Yeah, we didn't put maintenance in there. It was more construction costs and materials.
I think it would be helpful to just understand the one-time versus recurring in order to make an informed decision.
Okay.
Possible.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys, do you know, Amber, did Park Commission take up that specifically?
They did not take up ongoing.
So ongoing maintenance costs, drainage concerns sounds like part of your task was to take drainage concerns into consideration to help mitigate it.
I just want to make sure if we're putting in some beautiful plantation that it's not going to die.
Right. Yeah.
And the park right now, the ground gets really soggy, and it's almost like it's a sinkhole kind of in the middle a little bit, not much, but so it would be nice to make sure that the land has a slope instead of just convex instead of concave.
Well, we would definitely grade it so that the water would run away from that, but that also would be something to discuss if we thought that grass was the right thing to put there, or if mulch would be better long term.
I think I don't want to beat this horse too much, but seeing a breakdown not just of maintenance, ongoing maintenance costs, but having a better understanding as to how much in trees are we talking about, how much is the trail going to run us, how much is the fencing going to run us, basically just. I have no doubt. I know you guys do pretty good work, really good work actually over there. So I have no doubt that you guys have run those numbers. If we could just.
I think that we provided a baseline because we submitted it. We were getting things together for a grant application originally for this project. So I think we did a probable cost estimate. Okay. So we also can
the mulch versus grass, because on my feet grass feels much better personally. I think for the dogs it's more comfortable than mulch. So what's the?
Can you maintain grass?
Well, right now we do.
Yeah, back on the actual fields, which is another discussion, right? I mean, if we're talking about building a dog park, are we also having a conversation about overall improvement of the ball fields by moving the dogs off of the ball fields? Because the idea there, I would assume that the idea would be, if you have a designated place for the dogs, then you could do capital improvements on the ball fields such that you're maintaining a higher level of integrity on the fields, therefore you could exact maybe more attractive lease terms for whoever's leasing. I don't know that
Who mows all that
plays
down?
out.
My understanding was that softball paid for all the maintenance, the watering, et cetera.
Okay. So they won't do our ballpark will be, and the dog park's a totally different ballgame.
No, I mean, unless you can work, I mean, their lease is up for negotiation unless you can work something out where if you're gonna get the poop off their fields.
Right, yeah.
And you can get them to maybe,
To mow.
instead of making a capital investment here to invest in this, that could be a great trade.
So one of the things that I have had a very brief discussion with a rep from Little League, and part of that discussion was they would like to invest more in the infrastructure of the field. They need a handful of things from the city, more level of comfort about a long-term lease for them to justify the expense is largely the reason.
Yeah.
And then there were discussions about, whether they're going to invest more in the turf. The conversation that I understand that they've had is they'd really like to improve these ball fields to just an amazing grade, right? To basically compete with what they're seeing in surrounding areas.
So I think all the more reason then to get a more itemized breakdown of the expenses, because then we can specifically go back to them, and 30,000 is a big number, but if we can break it down into A, B, and C, we can use that in our negotiation.
And then we'll also have a better understanding, I guess, of how to justify an expense of $30,000. We're not just kind of throwing a dart at a board, hoping that it works. And I say that I had no doubt that you guys have you've run these numbers, but
I have a question for you all. So do you foresee that dogs would not be allowed on the fields at all anymore? Because last I had heard it was that if games were not going on, they could be out there.
Yeah.
But if games were going on, then they would be in the dog.
well, I don't want to even touch that third rail.
Okay.
But I will. What I would say, I mean, from a community investment standpoint, if I'm looking at a return on investment, I think the best return, if you're designating a spot specifically for an activity,
Yeah.
if I do
You're gonna
that,
get
it
a lot of
allows.
slack from the community.
You bet.
Yeah, we tried to get the longest run that we could here,
Sure.
being mindful I'm a dog owner and she likes to run. I brought her out here before on site visits, but we tried to get the longest run that we could, the biggest width, so that there could be a big space. I'll show you just a few other things. We've got materials, looking at how we can do some benches that are simple, but use the materials palette you're already using. Stone steps like you have out here in the native garden. Talked about the amenities that would be out there. Barriers, so we looked at some different fence types that we might use. That's still up for discussion.
When you price it would be good to know when you price this out, kind of what options you're talking about. Because, I mean, from an aesthetic standpoint, I suspect, that cyclone fencing might be the cheapest way to go, or a more cost-effective way to go. Perhaps the better way to say that. But maybe the aesthetic that we're looking for in the ballpark doesn't necessarily align. So it would be nice to know, again, how you price out your options.
Yeah, we can be specific with that.
And back to maintenance. So just longevity of materials would be helpful. In your
Okay.
expertise.
Definitely. Like I said, we want to reuse those boulders that you have out there. We can do a lot with those. And then thinking about terracing, if that's something we want to do. Plants, some shade trees, maybe a little color. There was talk about a pollinator garden. This could be an educational element if you want
And
to.
I thought that was something that Parks had talked about either on the still on track, or perhaps at the lower park area. I think they were talking with the Monarch organization.
I think we
I just want to make sure that we're not
we approved a budget item
double counting.
for park. Yeah, I think that's fair too, and I think we'd understand that better again with the breakdown. Yeah, I think, so the park commission. Sorry, just I feel like we're throwing these things at you. But
No. Well, a pollinator garden is just native plants.
Sure.
That it's a native garden, but you can choose specific plants that have certain colors that birds and butterflies are attracted to. What?
How do you keep the dogs out of it?
You plant it densely as much as you can. Dogs will be dogs, so you do your best.
Yeah, mine's definitely going in there.
But yeah, it's just an opportunity if you wanted to for signage for something educational, but that's not necessary. It also can just be.
Maybe I should go to the garden. There's too much shade over there.
The parks requested it and got approved for a fairly significant investment into a monarch garden. So I would I don't presume to know about pollinator gardens, but it would be the same thing.
Well, a monarch garden would be planted specifically for a monarch butterfly. Yeah, so
not quite the same.
But it also provides color. You
My
know.
plan is though just the best use of funds relative to the overall park development. If at the end of the day people are going there to throw the ball with their dogs, I just don't know that that's the best use of money relative to a gate or trash station or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what that user is seeking relative to the rest of the park.
Okay. And let's see, last is the donor recognition. So we talked about different options, but what we'd like to propose is something that's flexible and can grow over time. And it could be designed by the city with your art program. So these are just some interesting, different, inspirational images.
Is that something that you talked about in conjunction with the pet store that wanted to donate the fountain? Because I know that was something that had come up.
I don't know if the funds were from them, but we had a meeting months ago up top here where you were originally going to put the fountain, and we talked about ordering stones for a patio for a walk, a donor walk. And so I don't know where the funding was coming from.
I think that would just be I think that's a great idea, and it's something that the community would likely get behind really quickly. So if we could turn that back to parks as a potential fundraising effort. I know it had been talked about maybe 6 months ago, but it's worth kind of putting back on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't know where.
They did elect to do the paper program, but we just haven't launched it.
Okay. So that, again, when we get to the cost breakdown, to the extent that this was a component of it, it would just be helpful for us to understand in the overall context of kind of what the other committees are doing.
Yeah, it'd be good for us to touch base about the paver program because I know it's a little, I guess something like this can grow over time and be more organic. And pavers, when you're creating a pathway, it's harder to do that with it. And if you put the pavers down and then you have to take them out to engrave them, it's a little tricky. So
I think
we're looking at alternatives.
the intent is the right one.
Yeah.
The medium is up for discussion, and that's something that we could definitely benefit from input.
Okay, sounds good. We'll touch base on that. All right, that's all I've got. You guys have any other questions?
Let's see what. Do we want to take action, or I think probably the takeaway is we probably need a little bit more information to make sure that we're making an educated decision. And Amber, if we could also make sure that the Park Commission understand we are in favor, I think generally of exploring this, but we really need to make sure that we're making an educated decision on it.
we will revisit our cost estimate and see where we're at, and then do a little more fine detail breakdown and
Great.
get that back for you.
Perfect. And I'll tell you, Amber, when's the next park commission meeting?
Tuesday.
Any chances that Tuesday's too quick of a turnaround? Or that you or Brian could be at the park commission meeting just to help?
Tuesday, what time is the meeting? 8 a.m.
I'm guessing Brian's going to it.
No, I'm used to evening meetings here.
Sure.
8 a.m. I will see. He's been traveling all week,
Sure.
so I don't know where he's at with that. But
Even if you guys could maybe just send the information over to them. That is, what I don't want this to do is get lost in the shuffle for however many months.
Yeah.
We miss a meeting or something.
yeah, well, I know we already have that baseline,
Yeah.
so it shouldn't be too hard. I just don't know how much behind he is after being out of town all
Totally
week.
understand.
So I will check in with him and let him know the takeaway and see what we can do.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And we got you out of here by 7:30.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next up, we got Retail Coach. 6, presentation by Retail Coach, LLC, regarding a comprehensive commercial corridor analysis.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sorry. Is there a name?
Retail Coach.
No, no.
No, the girl that was just here.
Oh, sorry, that's Jessica with Nudge.
Zarowitz.
Yeah, I'm not even going to pretend I know how to spell that.
It did the thing.
Just, kick it.
It's like it wants to. You could go back and tell the women's club they've really done a good thing
Good.
by
Yes, this is true.
purchasing this smart board.
Can't wait to see it in use.
We get set up next week?
Well, I'll go ahead and get started if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know this is my heart, so I'll get started. My name's Aaron Farmer. I'm actually president of the Retail Coach now. That happened 2 days ago, so I almost said the wrong thing. But thank you. President of the Retail Coach. We are a firm that works with municipalities, and that's across the state and across the U.S. to, number one, understand what your opportunities are from not just a retail perspective, but office, manufacturing industry, depending on the type of community that you are. So we work all over the country, as I said. I'm based here in Austin, so I live out in Dripping Springs. We've got our other team members here in Austin as well. I think this is my 3rd time in the last 2 weeks that I've been out to Rollingwood. I've driven the corridor maybe 20 times now, looking at properties that are here that maybe are not serving their highest and best use. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today, is really what we call a commercial corridor analysis strategy. And you'll hear me call that a strategy and not a study. What I know about studies is studies go up on a shelf and they sit there. And that's not what we want to see. And that's one of the reasons why we've been doing this as long as we have, is we realize that if we're going to take something to you, bring something to you, we can't just say, here it is, now go figure it out. We've got to develop strategies to really make these things happen. So what we're looking at here is a commercial corridor analysis strategy. Real quick, this is our team. The mayor and Amber met our team on a couple occasions now, but Kelly Kofer is our CEO. You know who I am now, and then Kyle Kofer. The 3 of us will be the project team that are here on the ground. Now, we have other members that will be part of this team throughout the process, but the 3 of us will be here on the ground if we get a chance to work with you. A little bit about us. I mentioned we work all over the U.S. About 90% of our projects are here in Texas. Just in the last 5 years, we've recruited about 3.5 million square feet of retail to communities, clients that we work in. That relates to about $600 million in additional sales tax dollars. So going out, looking at communities that are not serving their highest and best use, maybe have some opportunities, and then identifying ways to make those happen. So worked in about 500 communities over the last 20 years. First thing we want to look at is a market analysis. And this is key for any type of strategy like this, is understanding the market. And when I say understanding the market, I'm not just talking about Rollingwood. I'm not just talking about Bee Caves Road. I'm talking about we've got to know what's happening, obviously, in Westlake Hills. We've got to know what's happening even at Barton Creek Mall. We've got to know what's happening there. What's happening there is going to impact the opportunities here. Also, out on the 360 MOPAC, just understanding the overall market here. So we're going to do a competing community analysis. That'll be key. We're going to define a trade area. And I'll talk more about the trade area here in a second, but we use mobile phone data to do that. And when we get into that, I think it'll amaze you to see what kind of information we have access to. And terrifying. Demographic data, psychographic data, looking at the daytime and nighttime population. That's something that we've noticed just in our last few days here. Your daytime population is completely different than your nighttime population. And y'all know that, being residents of the community, but it changes at 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, it's completely different. So taking a look at that, and then also looking at a gap analysis. What's not here? What are people leaving this community for? What are people passing through and not stopping because you don't have those things? So we're going to look at all of those as part of this market analysis. Now, the study area for this project is really Bee Caves Road from one end of your city limits to the next end of the city limits, and then that small area that you have on MOPAC there, small area of frontage you have there on MOPAC. That would be really the study area that we would concentrate on. Mentioned I've been here several times. That's what we've already started looking at. What are the opportunities there? Now, you're mostly built out. Okay, there might be one or two small sites here that you can see some small new development take place, but most of what the opportunities are redevelopment. I will tell you, I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but my grandparents lived in Austin, so they lived over by Phil's Cafe, if you know where that is. So we had some of their best friends lived in Rollingwood. This is 30 years ago, and we would drive out here to Rollingwood. For me at the time, it felt like a long way out here, but I will tell you, a lot of those shopping centers that were there are still here and really haven't changed. The facade looks the same and those sort of things. So it's interesting to kind of see that, but we want to look at this corridor as a whole and really see what those opportunities are. So I mentioned it's really important to know what your trade area is, to know where your consumers are coming from, know where your visitors are coming from. You're getting people, we were talking about the park system here, we were talking about the softball fields and those sort of things. Where are those people coming from? You know, that kind of information is important. So if you have a cell phone, raise your hand. Everybody? Okay. Everybody's got a cell phone. Well, previously when we would do analysis and strategies like this, we would look at drive times. You know, how many people live within a 20-minute drive time of Rollingwood or a 10-minute drive time? Well, those computer models have become a thing of the past. So what we're focused on now is we use cell phone technology to track people, track who's coming to the community. We're not selling that data. Nobody's getting your address. But it's key when we're looking at what the opportunities are to know where people are coming from. So I went ahead and just ran an analysis just for the heck of it at Trader Joe's. Okay, Trader Joe's obviously has a pretty good draw for the community. What we were able to tell, but we looked at it over a 12-month period. Trader Joe's has about 160,000 consumers that shopped at that Trader Joe's over the last 12 months. That correlates to about 733 visits. So the average consumer is visiting about 4 or 5 times, okay? What we can tell is what are the busiest days. You can kind of see it down here at the bottom here. It's hard to see, but we've mapped every single day of the year. So it makes sense they're closed on Christmas. That's why we have, they're closed on Thanksgiving. There's certain days where you see the drop at the bottom there. That's the least amount of visits. But we can track daily visits. We can track time of day. We can track hourly visits. So what we're looking at here is a heat map. And what we can tell there, where the blue dot in the middle is there, the blue pinpoint, that's Trader Joe's. But we can tell where your consumers are coming from. So the darker the red, the higher the concentration of consumers that are actually shopping in your community, actually coming to the community for certain things. This is the kind of information we need now. So forget about the drive times, forget about the radial computer models. This is what we want to see. Now, what's interesting, I don't have it in this presentation, but right now we're looking at the we're looking at the nighttime population. But when I look at the daytime population, it completely changes. So this map looks completely different. So it makes sense why after 5 o'clock, you're seeing, some different things happening there. You can't really see it here, but we can tell the busiest times of day. So, for example, Trader Joe's right here, the busiest time of day for Trader Joe's is 1 p.m., which was kind of interesting. It drops off a little bit, obviously, in the evening. But then we can also tell at the bottom here, and again, it's hard to see, but where people are coming from to shop at Trader Joe's. 50% or so are coming from home. 65% are going to home after Trader Joe's. Maybe they've got to get frozen items back and really those sort of things. But we can also tell where else they're going. Westlake High School. 1.3% of your traffic to Trader Joe's comes from Westlake High School. We can tell they're going to 1% goes to Barton Creek Square after they go to Trader Joe's. I will tell you, Trader Joe's is obviously an asset to the community. We've got a lady that's on my son's baseball team. And she's like the Trader Joe's. She goes to Trader Joe's. She takes orders. Okay, I live out in Germany Springs. She'll take orders. She said, I'm going to Trader Joe's. One interesting thing about that, she thinks it's in Westlake Hills. She doesn't put together that it's actually Rollingwood. And I know y'all are working on some branding and those sort of things. So this type of analysis we're doing will coincide with that and understanding where people are going, how they're getting here, do they know they're here, how do we change that thinking there. So one of the parts of this, so to wrap up that, understanding who your consumer is, understanding what those opportunities are. Where are the gaps? We can tell, is it a sporting goods store that could be here and could be successful? We're able to pinpoint and we're able to tell that, maybe you're leaking $10 million. We call it retail leakage to a sporting goods store. Maybe it's Dick's Sporting Goods or maybe it's Academy. We can tell that information and then use that to understand what needs to be here. With the limited amount of space you have, with the limited amount of lease space you have or existing space, we're able to identify ways to look at that. How do you really capitalize on your opportunities? So one of the things that we're going to really look at here, I think, which is the key in this entire process, is what we call our highest and best use analysis. And the retail coach, what we'll do is we'll analyze all of the properties. So every single property along this corridor. So again, Bee Caves Road and then also Mopac. And we're going to determine what their highest and best use is. I will tell you, from driving the corridor, you have, I don't want to say many, but you have several properties that are not serving their highest and best use. That, based on the value of that land, based on different things, you could have a higher use there. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at existing market conditions. So that could be everything from who their neighbor is, what's next door to them, how big is the lot, how big is the property.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
But, do you have an understanding of the ownership of the property and the existing leases in place?
We do.
Is
So
that factored into the analysis?
that's a part of this. So we've started doing some research already, and that would be a big part of this is understanding the ownership. So existing ownership, how long have they owned the property? Is it somebody is an absentee owner? Is it somebody out of California that owns a shopping center?
Yeah, my question is just going back to the strategy versus study.
Yeah.
Just how actionable are these items given the land ownership?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll get to that here in a second and how we identify how to make those things happen. But that's key. You're going to have properties that you might not be able to do anything with them. They might just not sell, but then you will have some that will. So I'll get to that here in just a second about what some of those actionable items would be. So we're going to look at traffic counts and traffic patterns. One of the things that I've noticed is you've got some parking issues here in this community. At different shopping centers and other places, so that would be something we look at. Sightline visibility is key. Secondary traffic arteries, all of these things that we're going to look at. Topography, you got some topography issues, and you got some depth issues on some of these properties as well that might be able to be mitigated. You might be able to make some things happen there with some unique ways of looking at that, and then also looking at proximity to retail office clusters. So just to wrap up here, we will make recommendations of improved uses for each property. So we like to make those recommendations before we even know some of the ownership, or we like to look at the options before we know some of the ownership issues there. But are they serving their highest and best use? I will tell you, just having looked at some of them, a lot of your sites are not serving their highest and best use. We'll also look at property assemblage, okay? So is there a way to assemble some properties? Maybe it's, 2 or 3 sites that are right next to each other. Is there a way to assemble those properties, going to the owners, to make that happen so we can go in and maybe make that use better. Bring in a larger player or something like that. We'll look at that on both corridors. We're going to recommend strategies, and this is where it comes in. You asked about the ownership issues. We're going to go property by property to understand the ownership. We're even going to call the owners. We're going to talk to them and really understand what is their long-term play. I will tell you, just looking at the market that we're in right now, anywhere in Austin, okay, the property values are increasing rapidly. So there are a lot, just in our experience working in the region, a lot of these calls that we make to property owners that, we can say, did you know your property is valued at this much? And a lot of them, especially if they're absentee, they might not realize that. It's as high as it is. Some of these, a lot of times, they're tied up in corporations that own thousands, hundreds, and thousands of properties. So we're going to talk to them individually, understand, is there an opportunity? I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, the answer we get is, yes, there is an opportunity. We might sell it. Possibly, what's the price? Those sort of things. So we're gonna do the background work on that to see what that is. But we're going to actually make recommendations on strategies. So it's not going to be, hey, here's a property that is not surfaced in highest and best use. This would be a good fit. We're actually going to identify strategies to make that happen. So does it need to go 2-story? Is that something you need to look at? Is it multi-level? You've got limited space to work here, and you've got to look at ways to maximize the space and really how we use that. And then we're going to look at return on investment. Mayor, I know you're big on ROI and return on investment and how these things look. We want to do that property by property. If you were to bring in a higher or better use of a property, what are we looking at? Is it increased property tax value? Is it increased sales tax? And sales tax drives a lot of those things. So that's what we're going to look at as far as what those opportunities are. That's really key in this process. These are not properties. I haven't done the background work on these properties yet, but these could be possibilities of properties not serving their highest and best use looking at current market. So, gas station, for example, taking up some space there, not saying that, there's an opportunity, but in our experience working, these are some of the types of uses that we see turn over after a certain amount of time and being in the community for a while. So lastly, part of this process as well is what we call retail coaching. And this is where we get our name, the retail coach. We're going to look at community development recommendations as well. So I know that y'all are already going through the branding and identity process, or identity branding process, which is key. Because one of the things that we've heard is people don't know Rollingwood. Okay, they drive through. You have to deal with a lot of your addresses saying Austin or Westlake Hills, and even some of your. When I looked up some of your shopping centers, they actually, or some of your businesses, they actually relate to Westlake Hills, or they relate to something else. So looking at that, we're going to look at signage as well. Some of the restaurants have closed over the last few years. I think signage has been an issue for that. What are some opportunities there? Quality of life. That's what this all boils down to, really, is quality of life. You've got residents that are moving in. You've got existing residents that have been here for a long time. What's going to help increase that quality of life? We are actually spending more as a country out to eat than we are going grocery shopping. So are there opportunities for restaurants and those sort of things that could be successful here? A brew pub, something like that that's would be family oriented, would something the residents would like. We're going to look at pride of ownership. There's some issues with on a couple of properties with just not maintaining some of those properties. And for passerbys and people and even residents, a lot of times it becomes a pride of ownership issue. And if it's a possible investor in this community or somebody coming in, they're going to look at that pride of ownership. Gateways are important. First thing that you see when you drive into a community is very important. I used to be a site selector for a retailer. One of the first things I would do is I would go to each gateway and see what it looked like. Is the first thing I see, a broken down gas station. That's obviously not the case here, but those are things I would keep. Is it a median that's not mowed? Is it a retaining wall that's not maintained? Those are the sort of things that I would look at as a site selector to identify what are the opportunities here. Is there an opportunity in this community? And the community identity, which y'all are taking part of, I think we can help in that process as well. So what we're proposing here is this corridor analysis and strategy. Again, do not want to come back with a booklet or a final report that sits on the desk. We want to come back with actionable strategies that I think we can help you implement down the road. Now, the key here, and you hit on it, was some of these things might not happen immediately. So we need to look at some goals. You know, what are the 3-year goals, something that can happen quickly. But then we've also got to look out 5 years, 10 years, based on existing leases and those sort of things. So it's not all going to happen at once, but it'll be kind of a stair-stepped process to make a lot of these things happen.
So, in full disclosure,
Sure.
I buy and sell restaurant chains for a living.
Awesome.
I also principally invest.
Cool.
So my biggest concern is, again,
Sure.
how actionable. Would I like to see all of these jewelry shops get out of Rollingwood and have
Sure.
some restaurants? Absolutely.
Sure.
But unless we can actually affect that change, which to me comes down to the real estate ownership or the lease
Exactly.
terms in place,
Yeah.
my hands are tied.
You're exactly right. So that's where we would come in during that initial phase, is really doing the research on every single one of those properties. So that's valuable right there.
So
Just knowing
does your
what that
value
property is.
also come then not only understanding the ownership structure
Sure.
of all of this real estate, but do you also participate in the negotiation or persuasion to affect that change, or is it simply in the recommendation we believe that these plots are actionable and these are not?
We like to be as involved as we possibly can. So if it comes down to changing hands and real estate transaction and those sort of things, we'll step back. We're not a broker, but we want to be involved in that process. Hey, you know, this property's for sale. Well, we just found out this property's for sale as well. Let's see if we can assemble that site and kind of make that happen, and even look at negotiations. Because just because you have maybe say one of these shopping centers has leases that are tied up, that's not a deal killer. You know, you can come in and rewrite a lease if you get the go-ahead from other those that are leasing the property. So we look at ways to look at that. And I will tell you, just knowing what businesses are here, there are some existing businesses in town. I talked to a few. I went into some businesses. They're not happy with the state of some of the shopping centers that they're in. Mm-hmm. So they would be willing to renegotiate some of their leases. But what it's going to do is you're going to be able to, you know, get a little bit higher rent for some of these properties probably. However, it's going to increase the property value. And in the end, hopefully increase sales tax and other revenues coming to those existing businesses.
I don't know the composition of the real estate ownership. Is it
Sure.
REIT? Is it mom and pop?
You've got a mixture. So I don't know if y'all know that, but just from some existing research that I've done, it's a mixture, to be honest with you. A lot of it, and it's changing hands over time, but a lot of it was mom and pop ownership that bought these 50, 60 years ago that still have, yeah. So, you know, when we see that, a lot of times it's time for a lot of that to turn over. So, I mean, it's easy to sit on this side and say this, but from a timing standpoint, with the market like it is, and where we're at right now, this would be the time to look at that ownership and figure out, are there some changes that can happen?
Is it fair to say that you guys are looking at basically looking at to link up both buyers and sellers? Is that kind of looking at both sides of the equation?
We do
offer options for both sides of the equation.
I mean, we do. I mean, that's what. So you mentioned you buy or you're involved in the transactions with restaurants. We also help restaurants. We help retailers. We do a lot of the analysis for them, helping them understand what opportunities are. So we have the ability to kind of link those up. I work with developers on an everyday basis. I'm headed to the International Council of Shopping Centers Convention. I think it's my 14th or 15th year to go out there next week or 2 weeks from now. And, you know, if we've got projects like this, if we've got properties like that, we can hand those over to possible developers. I actually talked to a developer, I think I told you about this, Mary, but 2 days ago, that has interest in being here. Their office is right across the street. They have interest in development and looking at some of those things.
I mean, we've got Endeavor already on our
Yeah, Endeavor here. I know they're.
Yeah, absolutely. Endeavor's great.
I've had conversations with a handful of developers, actually, just very high level questions. What are you guys doing in the city, kind of thing? And it's, well, I don't know. Like, come ask us.
The JLLs of the world, the Endeavors of the world, which are already here, those are some that I see, just looking at what they're doing in other parts of Austin and what you're seeing in the greater Austin area, they're the ones that I think will have interest, especially because the value of this land is so high.
Do you think, given the discussions around MOPAC and the Bee Caves intersection, will that impede folks from making a decision one way or another until that's kind of hammered out?
So some of the initial conversations that I've had, they don't seem to be too worried about it. There's quite a bit of I mean, this is not going away. So, I mean, they're going to look at that from a long-term standpoint and see how that's going to impact them. But I think that demand is still going to be here, just from what I can tell.
Well, that's more residential.
Well, it's the people coming through the community.
Yeah.
There's no reason
It's
to
a
go through the community.
primary artery.
They're not, no restaurant is going to want to be here. We don't have enough people in this neighborhood.
So one of the things, to your point, one of the things that the city's exploring is actually how to capture greater amount of traffic, primarily pedestrian and cycle traffic. And one of the things that we're really exploring, I think in a meaningful way, albeit very early stages, is how to potentially build up Old Delana Lane into a pedestrian and bike path, with the idea that what we're able to do there is capture, or at least provide easy access for hundreds of thousands of folks that visit Zilker Park for any given.
I'm sure C3 would love to help on that.
Right? Well, and that's kind of like, we know that there's opportunities here. So the idea, we've had an actual initial conversation with Austin Parks. I've reached out to other folks at the city of Austin with regards to this, and I think a natural conversation would also be to see C3 and see just, it's if we do it properly, it's something that checks boxes for everybody up and down the row, and if you couple it with the idea that, hey, by the way, businesses that may look to make a home, or even folks that are already calling, businesses that are already calling Rolandwood home, we're going to get you greater access to greater fit, especially foot traffic. That's got to be it's got to be a bonus.
So I drove down Old Delana Lane, kind of went through around the construction through Endeavor and got down there, and I love the idea. I mean, I think getting some pedestrian traffic here, along with the vehicular traffic and those sort of things, I think there's an opportunity there. There's a lot of people that, I mean, we even saw when I drove down there were people using that trail even though it's closed up. But, so people are going to come. And we've had a lot of success, and we've worked in a lot of these pedestrian-friendly restaurants and new kind of lifestyle centers that we've seen. So that's, I wasn't going to mention it, but that's a great thing to look at.
I'm not giving away all your secrets. You're going to unveil this is our value add. No, sorry.
But no, we see opportunity here. Like I said, just with the market the way it is, now would be the time to especially look at these ownership, what the background is on these ownerships. And we're not going to just say, hey, here it is. We want to walk you through this process. I mean, I think it's 88% of our clients are repeat clients, and it's because we spend time in the community, get to know our clients. So I've got projects like up in the Metroplex and some down here in the Austin area that we've been working with them for 15 years on obviously different projects, but the only way you can do that is if you're actually providing a value add and not just providing a report or something like that.
What's the turnaround on this engagement?
We're looking at about 60 days. I will tell you, we've done some research already on what a lot of the opportunities are. So it's not like we're having to start from just not knowing anything. We're looking at about 60 days for this initial.
Are we hands off and you just go and do your thing after the fact 60 days, or is there like a working relationship?
No, it's a working relationship. We've got stakeholder discussions as part of this process as well. So coming in and talking to this group, coming in and talking to other stakeholders that are identified. But no, I like to say we're very good at communicating. So we're going to have those conversations with you, and y'all are going to know some things we don't know. And it could be a landowner that is local that you have a relationship with that you might help us be able to bring them to the table a little bit quicker and try to get these things to happen, sooner than later. Well, thanks for having me, and I guess I'll stick around if there's any other questions. I'll be happy to answer them.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
We have 2 items. We have 7, which is a standard professional services agreement, and then we actually have discussion possible action authorizing professional. Well, there we go. So we got to bring up 7 first. I understand. Perfect.
So no action taken on 6th, though, right?
No action. Yeah, it's just a presentation. Thank you. Charlie, do you want to walk us through very quickly the standard professional services agreement?
Sure. How does this work? Do I push
Oh,
something?
no, you're good.
I'm good. Okay.
Yeah, you're covered.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So this is a standard professional services agreement. It's an agreement that we recommend to many of our clients that they go ahead and approve in advance. What this does for you is it means we don't have to review every single contract that comes through. Essentially what this agreement does for professional services is it sets up a scope of work that's attached as an exhibit to the contract, which then spells out the scope of work to be performed as an exhibit. It also sets out then an exhibit for purposes of payment and how payment is accomplished, subject to the Texas Prompt Payment Act and the restrictions associated with that. It provides under Section 4 how we deal with changes to the project work and any additional work. It requires that the contractor make any changes to the work that constitutes any errors or omissions that appear. Any additional work that we require that is outside the scope, we would have to make an addition to the agreement. It provides for prompt completion. The only part that really could be adjusted that we would recommend it would be subject to project by project is the insurance levels. These are pretty high insurance levels, and because it's mostly these are talking about some sort of an engineering project, oftentimes, or architectural project, oftentimes, and the city may decide that these aren't appropriate insurance levels for a particular project, so that can easily be changed based on policy as to what insurance levels you want to use. One of the things we put in here that most folks try to take out is upon completion of any project, the city, or in this case the EDC, owns all the documents that are created, as opposed to the way you normally see it or oftentimes see it in an architect or engineering agreement or other professional services agreement, is they own the documents and you have a right to use them. We put in here that you own the documents when it's over and said and done. Makes clear they're an independent contractor. It's got a non-collusion clause, deals with force majeure. It's got a termination agreement that basically allows for mutual termination between both the parties by either party for failure to fulfill obligations, so breach. By the corporation, the EDC, or I keep saying EDC, y'all refer to yourselves as a CDC, don't you? Community Development Corporation. To the CDC upon any notice to the professional for their failure to perform. And then also the corporation has the right to terminate at will for no reason at all with 30 days notice, and certain payments would be made to the service provider based on that termination. It's got an indemnification provision, and then the rest of it is boilerplate. So the purpose of this is for you to approve it, and then any professional service provider that comes through, you wouldn't have to approve this agreement ever again. It would be what you approved, only the scope of services and payments would be involved. And so if you approve this tonight, this particular agreement won't come back before you again, but any professional service provider, you would approve their scope of work and then authorize execution of the agreement.
For instance, how would it function, functionally speaking, how does it work if we want to consider less insurance for this particular project versus another? So would that be in the scope of services?
No, we would actually change the insurance Section 6 in this agreement.
For this, so would that be so functionally speaking, we would take action to have our attorney, you in this instance, negotiate based on this.
So here's what we normally do. Here's what we normally recommend. You approve this agreement, and you approve it with the caveat that the insurance can be changed sufficient to meet staff requirements.
Okay.
All right? Then it doesn't have to come back to you for that approval process ever. And that's what we would recommend. And then if staff believes, because it's, as the lawyer, we usually don't give advice on insurance levels. We defer that to staff.
Okay.
We can assist, but we usually defer it to staff.
Amber, Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's all right.
Amber,
Yeah.
do you feel comfortable making a determination about insurance levels?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
And we assist, but that's a policy. Insurance levels is a policy decision.
Yeah.
And so we defer to staff. We can assist, but we defer to you with respect to ultimate decision making.
Thank you.
It might be helpful if you have a copy of a sample policy for insurance levels.
Yeah, we can find something.
We could bring that to council.
Right. Well, what I would recommend if you all approve this as a standard professional services agreement, it would be subject to staff being able to, at their discretion, amend the insurance provisions, if that makes sense. And then it's just scope. After that, it's just adding a scope of services that you approve at a meeting and how they're paid, which you also approve at a meeting.
Okay. Any comments or questions? In that case, I would move to approve the standard professional service agreement as presented, with the caveat that insurance levels may be amended at the discretion of staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. So now I'll call 8. Susan, I know you're on a time, but do we have time to move through this very quickly? Okay.
As quick as possible.
Perfect. Discussion and possible action authorizing a professional services agreement by and between the Retail Coach LLC and the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation for the completion of a comprehensive commercial corridor analysis in an amount not to exceed $26,000 to be funded by RCDC. Do we have a motion?
I so move.
I'll second. Do we have discussion?
This is to get a formal proposal.
So this is actually to engage, and I think an important thing to note here is that we don't have a breakdown in our materials for this 26,000. I think you provided that, correct?
Yes.
Amber, do you have that?
I think it
Was it emailed out to everybody? I know I've seen it, but I'm not sure
It's
that.
back here. Project pricing, $12,500 upon execution, $12,500 upon completion, and fees, travel fees, reimbursable fees up to $1,000. It's on page 10. That's the 26.
I believe there's a scope of services attached with that as well.
Yeah.
called the corridor analysis proposal. The one it came out in the agenda that was sent Friday. Yeah, on the 3rd.
I don't suppose you have that in your presentation you could pull up really quickly? Quite all right if you don't.
Is this connected to the internet? I can pull that up.
Here's the page.
I'm sorry, what page did you say it was on?
Page 10.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the one I see. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about for
Yes.
payment and pricing.
And then scope of services was also included.
Yes, basically, basically what we have there is it's broken down. Proposal or the presentation pretty much followed the proposal, but it's broken down. You've got the market analysis is really the first phase that we're looking at there. So that's everything we talked about, from the mobile analysis, trade area determination, gap analysis, demographics. Second part of this proposal is the highest and best use analysis that we hit on. So again, kind of follows the proposal there.
So you go through, looking at what I've got in my hand, you go through phase 1 through phase 4.
Correct.
Scope of services.
Yes, sir. That's the scope of services. Broken down, we're looking at a 60-day process there. Yes, sir. 2 payments, $25,000, and then the $1,000 is reimbursable expenses. I honestly don't think we'll get to $1,000. It might be $200 or $300 just because we're close. But we tie that in there in case it's needed, but it would not exceed 26,000.
Did you find it, Mayor? Do you want me to email it to you?
I know I've seen it. I'm just having trouble pulling it back up again.
And then I can do print too, if anybody would like a print copy.
That'd be great. I'll tell you what, if you wouldn't mind just printing out a few.
Yep.
There's a couple folks here that don't have their computer with them. I was going to say, I've run through that and I've slept since then. So. Sorry, I was trying to move this along for you, Susan.
No, I know, and I have a call soon.
Yep.
So, my hesitation is understanding the real value add here. Understanding who comes into our community. I think one of the best examples was when we got the list of participants in the Little League team.
Sure.
Most everyone comes from Tarrytown. Not a lot of people are in this neighborhood.
Sure.
So to me, the folks that are coming central to Burlingwood, it's all 7873. For those that are going into Trader Joe's or some of that commercial area, $12,000 seems like a lot of money to figure that out. I don't,
Sure.
I'm familiar with Buxton studies and what you
Yeah.
can pull up.
Yeah.
Until, my feeling is, we have a good sense for who's coming in.
Sure.
What I don't have a sense for is what's actionable. And that's my biggest issue, as I've said a bunch of times. So I don't know if spending all this money coming in is worth it if we can't do anything about it.
Sure.
So I'd rather spend money learning what we can do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so. Any project that we would do, anything like this, I started my career at Buxton. So anything we would do, we've got to know what we're looking at here. We've got to know who's coming here. And yes, we do know people are coming from Tarrytown, but I will tell you, looking at the cell phones, they're coming from a lot of different places. One of the biggest areas that's coming here is Jerking Springs. Now, that might surprise you, but this is the closest Trader Joe's. So understanding who's coming into this market at different times during the day, so being able to look at that daytime population and then actually comparing that to nighttime is, I think, what's really important here. So the last thing I want to do is give you something that's not actionable, but that's where the highest and best use analysis is going to come in, is actually providing actionable steps and strategies to make that happen. But in order for us to do it good, for us to do something right and do it, we've got to see that analysis. So, anecdotally, yes, we know, what sports teams they're coming in for and those sort of things, but we've got to have that breakdown at all times of the day. Who's coming here for lunch? I mean, Chinatown's busy at lunch. Other restaurants are busy at lunch. How far into downtown are they coming from? How far? So that's where I think the data for us is something that we have to have in order to actionably do this. If that makes sense.
I guess when we have that data, what value are you adding for us to have kind of make the best use of it?
So the data, we're going to know, that's going to tell us who should be here. It's going to tell us, are there retailers that should be here that aren't here? Are there restaurants that should be here? Are there types of developments that should be here? They have different thresholds they look for in population and trade area size.
And do you have the network to reach out to those different groups?
Our network is, I'd put our network up against anybody. And it's just that history we have. It's all about relationships, right? So if you've helped a restaurant, for example, open 10 successful restaurants, they're going to listen to you again. So we've leveraged our relationships over the last 20, 22 years. Yeah. So I'd put our relationships and kind of network up against just about anybody. Yeah.
So on that note, I should have asked this earlier, actually, that $350 million that you were responsible for bringing in, was that a result of your relationships or the actions taken by like a development commission like ourselves to going out and act proactively then trying to seek development opportunities?
That was using our relationships. So those were solely from, hey, we made the first contact. So that's how we knew, that's how we were able to track, and it was $600 million in sales tax dollars that came in or whatever it was. But those were, we made the first contact. So we identified a property, identified an opportunity, and then we went out and called on a retailer, called on a restaurant, a developer, and brought them in. So that's how we tracked that. So there were other projects that maybe a CDC or an EDC went after. We didn't track those. We tracked what were we responsible for.
Is that part of the engagement, or is that an addition to?
I mean, it's not formally. Typically when we come into a process like this, we'll have a recruitment phase on this, but we did include in there that we would build some relationships, and we would do that. So it is part of it. This is going to be a little bit longer term on some of these properties, just knowing what they are. So we're going to have some success initially getting some people interested, and some of them, like was mentioned earlier, it's going to be a little bit longer term based on existing leases and those sort of things. So I mean, the value from my perspective right now is getting an understanding of who owns these properties. Understanding, are they willing to sell? You could probably hire somebody and get somebody to call phone and this, but are they going to know the lingo? Are they going to know? Is it a triple net lease? Is it, what are the backgrounds on those sort of things? So that's where our expertise, I guess, in that industry would come into.
How do we keep you guys motivated working on our behalf once we've paid you the final 12.5 and you delivered the final reports in 60 days? Because obviously, as we've noted, that this is going to be an ongoing project. How does that work?
So, we would look at an ongoing relationship. We would look at identifying we've got to know what the opportunities are here before we can identify what is that strategy for going forward and those.
What does that relationship look like?
So,
from an actual cost perspective.
So typically, we're hired on a yearly basis. So our typical project cost is anywhere from $45,000 to $50,000 if we're doing all of this and recruiting for community. So to continue recruiting, we'd be looking at about $1,000 a month is what we would look at as an add-on to this. However, again, we've got relationships, and I think we're
a relatively small community compared to
exactly, and that's why.
So considering that we're a smaller community,
sure.
Do you think $1,000 a month would actually hold true for us? We're not going to have a fraction of the relationships.
I agree.
That most communities, I assume you work in, are going to require you to manage.
Sure.
What do you think our ongoing relationship would look like?
So there's a reason we priced it at $26,000. If we were working, in another market around here, maybe on South Congress or something like that, this would be closer to $50,000 to $70,000 is what we would be looking at on an arrangement like this. So $1,000 a month would be for a community of this size is what we would look at there. So that would put you at a total of $36,000, $37,000, whatever the math ends up being. But I don't know that we're there yet. I would say if we get a chance to work with you, I'd like to come in and go through phase 1 through phase 4 and then actually bring this back to you all, sit down with you, and actually talk about strategies.
Yeah.
The best strategy might not be to initially go after retailers. The best strategy might be to go after developers. Is it mixed-use developers? Do we go talk to Endeavor about some other possibilities? I'm a big fan of diversifying and not having one developer take up everything. So do we go talk to the JLLs? Do we go talk to the retail connections of the world? So before we even talk about that part of it, I would want to do this analysis and the strategy first, and then look at what does that strategy look like. Because every project is, what you need is different than what other communities need. So I hate to even propose that at this point without knowing. I don't know enough, if that makes sense.
All right. Do we have other questions or thoughts or comments? We've got a motion and a second. We're ready to take a vote on it.
Sorry, who was the initial motion?
Pat motioned and to engage. Yeah, perfect. And I was the second. So if there's no additional questions, thoughts?
From a timing standpoint, that's one thing I didn't mention. We would want to get started immediately here. You want to take advantage of the market you have here. Who knows what's going to happen 6 months down the road or a year down the road. So we would, if we get a chance to work with you, we would actually be back in the market next week, kicking this off. So I wanted to mention that. It's on the
only final concern I have.
Sure.
I know I'm difficult.
No.
Given that we have an election coming up, the
Sure.
impact that that has on obviously real estate and especially retail.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to wait? Or would your recommendation change meaningfully post-election depending upon the way things go?
Yeah, so I can actually kind of look at this from a different side too, because I'm actually on the Economic Development Board in Dripping Springs, and we've talked about these things. The way I look at it is the market is so good right now that if you have an opportunity to go in here and change the use and over the next 2 years of a couple of these properties and get some momentum going and those sort of things, I would jump on it. And that's the way I look at this. That's why if you probably don't, but if you keep up with Dripping Springs while we've got some momentum going out there, it's because we want to get ahead of this. Like president or not, a lot of people in the retail and real estate world love him right now because of the way the market is, whether it's because of our current president or something different. So my recommendation would be to jump on that, get some things going here, because say it does, bottom out 2 years from now or year and a half, whenever the next election is, you've at least got some positive momentum going, and you're not going to just sit here and keep waiting, if that makes sense.
Not difficult. Excellent questions.
Yeah, no, this has actually been, I've been to some crazy meetings, so this has been great. So.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
A nay? So motion passes 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And the next order of business, I guess you'll hear from our attorney with our service agreement, correct?
Yes, but so before this project comes forward, there are other hoops that have to be jumped through.
Okay.
And City Council's going to have a couple readings of a resolution.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Even better.
Before we can do that.
There you go.
We'll move it forward based on this vote.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. And so you can voice your nays to City Council.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I have a West Coast call.
No worries. Thanks.
Ruining my life.
All right, thank you.
And I know it's
Thanks, Aaron.
one of the last items, so we can
Oh,
add it
sorry.
to
Well,
the
I think
next agenda.
would you like to? Is your preference to table it? I will try to bear the torch for you. If
So
you would
very
like.
quickly, I would love to start a professional networking organization in Willingwood. I know there's some hesitancy to do women only, but I believe that that's something that's really underrepresented in the central Austin area. Certainly doesn't exist in Westlake or Tarrytown, and I think it's a point of differentiation for Willingwood. So I'm happy to open it to everyone. Well, I think the gentleman's club is much more networking focused than the women's club. It could be a great addition to our community. So that's my quit. I'm still thinking about it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that on your list?
It is. And what I'm going to do, if it's okay with everybody, actually.
Yeah, and you might be, since there's only 4 of y'all here, it might be best just to put off mine so you've got a full, I don't know how much benefit you'll have.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll
refer to the board.
We still have a quorum.
We do
We
have
still have
yeah.
a quorum,
But it's no
but my
doubt.
presentation, it seems to me it would be better if you had as many people here as possible.
Perfect. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're more comfortable giving your presentation, then, and if there's no objections, we'll put you off till next month.
I don't have any problem with that.
Right on. So then we'll talk, let's call it 10, discussion and possible action on a recommendation to the City Council regarding the creation and development of a community business development program aimed to promote and connect professionals in the City of Willingwood. Susan just addressed this from a high level. My personal thought, Susan called me and said, specifically a women's professional networking group. I think it's a brilliant idea. My only hesitation for putting it on the resume or on the agenda as a women's, as us promoting a women's professional group was I just didn't want to. I wanted to make sure we weren't running foul in any form or fashion by suggesting that it was a gender-specific group. So, but I think for all the reasons that Susan just highlighted, it is a brilliant idea that I, for one, am very much in favor of. As Susan pointed out, I'm not aware, nor is she, of any regional groups specifically aimed at helping professional women network. And
I think it's a great idea.
yeah,
I do
I like to start with
too.
that.
The B&I groups are all that I know of
okay.
around, and this probably be better
Do
than
they
that.
actually need our approval or permission for this?
Yeah, and so that was one of the things that Susan and I kind of spitballed back and forth. How is RCDC helpful in this fashion? And it was one of the things that I know Susan said that she was going to spearhead and kind of come back with some ideas.
Could we grant them almost like a seed? Is that an option?
And that's kind of something I don't necessarily know, and I'd be kind of hate to drop it on our legal counsel.
What's business development? You look at it that way.
Right.
Well, there's a provision in the statute for small communities, and it says, so you're going to get all this in a presentation later, but essentially you're limited to how you can spend EDC funds. It has to be a specified project as listed in the statute. One of the specified projects for smaller communities like this is that you can do a project that, in the opinion of the board, will promote new or expanded business enterprises.
Right.
And so to the extent that, and I am not at all familiar with what they're wanting to do, but to the extent that this board, and then obviously city council, because they have to approve any projects or expenditures, believes that it would promote new or expanded business enterprises, then it would be an appropriate project.
So I could actually speak to that. One of the things that Rollingwood has a fair amount of are professionals with home offices, working from home, whether it be their home business or some kind of satellite or remote working. We do have a number of individual professionals, one of our board members included, that it's we do have this this element in our community that I think would absolutely benefit, that RCDC could help foster in this regard. And I would, assuming that falls under our purview as an EDC, I would very much be in favor of putting this over to City Council to see if City Council would be in favor of us supporting this as a project. How a project would pan out, I think we probably need to kind of flesh that out a bit. I have no doubt that, just based on very brief conversations with Susan about this, that she does have some, very structured ideas as to how to implement this. But I think if nothing else, from a simple promotional standpoint from RCDC, I think it's a huge positive for
getting the word out is the hardest part of it, because anything we've tried to promote,
Well, between the work we've done on the rebrand, we're trying to get basically our own little development commission going, right, with the branding and the badging, and then you couple with this, you have a nice little story narrative to start talking about.
Yes.
We're open for business, we're supporting you, we have these great networking events.
and what so many people don't know, we're redoing the website, but so many people wouldn't even go to look at our website, so getting the acknowledging, getting people to
Press
understand.
release.
And to the extent that this would also promote the city of Rollingwood, you can spend up to 10% of your annual revenues for promotional purposes.
Okay.
And to the extent it does that, that might be a better place to utilize those funds, because you probably need some deliverables.
Right.
With the other ones. So.
Sounds good. But I think in that standpoint then, and again, maybe the best thing to do rather than take immediate action tonight is have this conversation and then wait until next month so that Susan can really get out back here and explain her vision behind it.
Where would you meet? How would you meet? How often? All that stuff.
And really how this body can be, how she envisions this body being supportive.
You might let her know, and if she needs to call me, that's fine.
Perfect.
But she'll probably want to be able to explain how, it's a appropriate promotional for the city of Rollingwood, or it's an expansion, it would assist in the promotion expansion.
And to that, I think Barry really hit the nail on the head there, right? I mean, this is part of building a storyboard about what Rollingwood is with regard to business, right? Fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your thoughts there. Does anybody have additional thoughts or comments on 10?
No action taken.
No action taken. We'll just intend to bring it up again the next meeting. Number 11 is review of the RCDC's financial reports and annual budget. Regrettably, our treasurer is out. Pat?
Yeah.
You're solid on this?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The financials, everybody got in the package. The most important item is the current revenue from sales tax. In the current period ending March 31st for that 1 month, looks like $16,023 in sales tax for the RCDC. I think that's probably the highest I've ever seen.
We're doing pretty well.
It's doubled since I've been on here.
Because of you.
Trader Joe's.
We should talk about correlation and causation.
Yeah. So that's that, and then total cash is cash and cash items is $266,000. So we've got money to fund the budget.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions with regard to the financial reports or annual budget? No? Thanks. Can I get a motion to adjourn? So, motion from Ms. Kittleman and second from Barry.
Yep.
Perfect. There we go. All in favor? All right, we are adjourned, guys. I want to thank you all very much for helping me move this along to make sure that Amber can beat the storms. We can all beat the storms, but especially Amber. She is a trooper. Charlie, thanks. You bet. There you go. This wasn't too awful. It's the longest one we've ever had. Close.
Nice. Very nice. Good questions. Productive. Amber, if it's all right, you
Yes.
have put together the scope of services with that.
Gary, thank you very much for the minutes.
Take what they have and just put it into a proper exhibit and make sure it makes sense. Is that all right? Okay.
That's the intent. Oh my goodness. If you believe that, they've also got a phenomenal bridge.
But they did a good job with that one.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, sir.
All right. Electrician or our house got struck by lightning Friday night.
So did I. It actually struck the power lines right behind us. Like my wife and I were sitting in the living room when the lightning burst hit, and it lit the whole thing up in a purple color.
His bike's inside. I was like 40 feet away. Bears were waiting for a long time. Quite scared. So it shorted out like our downstairs lights. And then both AC units.
Oh my gosh.
What else? Oh, it blew the
So was it just fuses?
It blew the no. It blew the fixtures like those exploded. The light switches went like two spots, like it blew out.
Everyone's okay though.
Yeah. I mean, we left and stayed at a neighbor's house, and I didn't know if the house was gonna burn down or not.
Sure.
That's scary. Hope your insurance covers.
Well, I was like, no big deal, but it's quickly, I can actually insurance claim here soon between the electrician and now the AC unit.
Yeah, AC
unit. They're like, don't tell them we gotta start the lighting and maybe we'll repair it.
Goodness.
Yeah. I got to meet your better half. That's what
All right, we'll see you.
Quite an impression on the mayor.
Oh man, the same thing I told you. I gave her a little bit. No, she's pretty good. I didn't realize, like one of our best friends, Jan Gordon, I didn't realize your wife was at Westlake. Different shops, I guess.
Yeah.
But We did, man. She was, it was a pleasure to meet her. She was stellar.
We got, that's the mayor, now can I speak to the mayor?
Yeah, of course.
What's going on with the, flood, like the pipe management?
That was right, Steve?
Like the drainage?
The planning.
You know,
Man,
where
that's
I
so-
live, so
Yeah.
my neighbor gets flooded. It was up,
Is it which one? Shadow or Marine?
So Kevin's one is, well, both. They're the ones who voted this vote.
Yeah, and the short answer is, and this always inevitably will come across as insensitive.
Who does your prosecution?
But Marine built in the floodplain.
I mean, they're
He did it, but somebody else did it.
The main thing
Is
is,
he the one that's lower down?
He's the one
He knows where the water should go.
Yeah, like, you just kind of like, look, man, like, we have explored it. So the
So
short,
you have to go to the dam.
the short answer is, we have, as a city, from an engineering standpoint, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to figure out how to do it. And those,
The only way you do it is you have to buy Kevin's house and then make that a drain, like, it's
so
too
exactly,
water.
and we have, we really, I will, if you give me minutes, I will give you a call.
So, be the minutes?
That's it. Safe travels home.
hello.
The short answer is, for both of those guys, I know neither of them built their homes there,